Hi guys, welcome back to our channel.
It's Jennifer
And Emily.
and this is part 2 to telling scary stories while playing Arsenal.
And this time I'm the one that's gonna be playing Arsenal.
So let's get into the video. Around the age of 7 to 13, I experienced a lot of unnatural phenomena. Inside and outside where I live, it was hard for me to reach out and tell others of what I saw as no one would listen to a kid. One night, myself, my brother, and his friend was in our room playing an old game on our PS1. It was a normal night, one which was fun, light-hearted, and cheerful. We were taking turns playing, and I had just finished my turn. I handed the controller over to my brother's friend and watched from the background. As I patiently waited my turn, something in the corner of my eye caught my attention. It was my bed cover rising up as if someone's head was underneath. Curious as I was, I put my hand on top of the rising cover, fully expecting something to be underneath. But to my dismay, my hand sunk. There was no one underneath. Frightened, I ran downstairs to my mother to tell her what had happened, but she shook it off, offering it as nothing more than me being delusional. But I know what I saw that day, and it was just the start of what was to come. A few nights had passed, but the incident was still looming at the back of my mind. Nonetheless, I pushed on. That night, we were set to have a bonfire. Now I was rather excited by this as of my childish ways, and looked forward to the night to come. Now time has passed, and there I was at the end of the night, completely oblivious to what was awaiting me ahead of time. As I walked through the hallway on the way to my room, I looked out the window to see my brother putting out the bonfire with a bucket of water. Afterwards, I made my way to my room to get off the bed. All was well. It was around 8 p.m. and I was rather young at the time, around 8 to 9, so I headed to bed early to get some sleep. Fast forward about 3 to 4 hours, and I wake up needing to go to the bathroom. My brother was still awake at this point, so I informed him that I was quickly headed to the bathroom. His eyes glued to the screen of his TV mumbled back, "Alright, just don't wake up Mom and Dad." After that, I made my way through the hallway to the bathroom. On my way, I glared through the window to see the bonfire once again lit. Now I was confused at this point, as I clearly saw my brother put it out hours before. But these thoughts quickly left my mind at what I saw shook me to the core. Beside the light bonfire lay a hand I vividly remember. It had a greenish tint to it, an almost rotten look. My eyes wide and my skin cold, I raced to my brother to tell him what I had saw. Worryingly, he followed me out to the window side where I had seen the light bonfire in hand. But to my disbelief, the bonfire was cold and dark, not a flame in sight, neither the hand. My brother shrugs it off and goes back to our room, but I know what I saw. I know, but no one else would believe me. But it wasn't long until they would. A month had passed without any disturbance or activity within or around my home. But of course, the next night changed it all. Now I used to share a bunk bed with my brother before he moved out, and I was the one on the top bunk. Now this night I was the only one home. My brother had slept round his friends and my parents were out until late. So there I lay asleep atop of the bunk bed, not a worry in the world, until I was suddenly awoke to a hard scraping noise coming from behind me. Frozen in fear, I lay still, eyes clenched shut as I tried to fall back to sleep. Suddenly, the feeling of breathing could be felt tingling on my neck. As the scraping grew louder, unable to move, I lay there, paralyzed with fear, hoping for it to end, when all of a sudden the downstairs door opened, and in came my mother and father. At that moment, the breathing stopped as well. Relieved, I collapsed back to sleep to wake up in the morning, wondering if it was just a dream. Dream or not, after that last event, things changed. Things changed so much that not even my parents could ignore what was happening. Every night after that night, you would see white figures walk past the windows, TVs turning on and off on their own, and things falling off shelves. But it wasn't until one night, when we were all sitting at the table having our dinner, that we heard a massive crash coming from one of the rooms. We all went to see what had happened, and to our surprise, all the books had been thrown off of the shelf, and the TV was on playing static. It was at this point in which we called in a priest to bless the house, and ever since it's been quiet, not a thing out of place. Until recently.
I slept over at my buddy's house, woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of a woman crying, coming from right outside his bedroom. I figured it was his mom arguing with another family member, so at first I felt very awkward rather than scared. Then things began getting more intense. She started screaming, $7? You did this for $7? And then she began getting louder and louder. I thought I might need to intervene before someone got hurt. I stood up, walked to the door, and grabbed the handle. Twist opened the door. Instant dead silence. Every sound I heard died in a heartbeat. It went from World War I war zone to being able to hear a mouse fart. Outside his room, every light in his house was off. There was no one else awake. Nothing. I still can't explain what happened. I woke my friend up and he told me he once saw a lady in a white gown walking up his steps. Umum thought it was his mom, but when she didn't respond to him calling out to her, he followed her up the stairs, and when she turned to a corner, she disappeared. Then one day, when they are moving out of his house, his cousin and sister arrived to the new house after grabbing some things from the old one, and tell everyone that they swore they saw a girl in a white gown standing at the upstairs window as they pulled out of the driveway. Me and my friend never told anyone about our story, so his cousin and sister said they saw what they saw without any prior knowledge of the situation.
My husband and I have lived in this house for 6 months. It's a new house, not our forever home, but still nice. Our room is situated in the basement, and it gets pretty dark sometimes. Neither of us are scared of the dark, necessarily, but he gets pretty creeped out by the idea of things being in the dark. For the last couple nights, I've been messing with him. Whenever he gets out of bed at night to use the restroom or check on our dogs, I start to whisper a phrase. The shadow man walks at night. He's not a fan of this joke. It always creeps him out. Quit saying that, he says. It's creepy. You're gonna keep me up with your antics. I know it messes with him, but I can't help it. Sometimes it's kind of funny to see such a strong man seem scared of a little phrase. Last night he got up pretty late. I happened to wake up and see him walking towards the other side of the room. The shadow man walks at night, I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. This time he didn't react. Maybe he didn't hear me, so I just ignored it and tried to get back to sleep. It had been a while since he got up, and I didn't hear him come back to bed, so I rolled over to check. There he was, laying next to me, sleeping soundly. Odd, I thought, but maybe I was half asleep when he came back. Time seems to pass much faster when I am sleeping. This morning when he woke up, I asked him if he had heard me last night. What are you talking about? He asked. I didn't get up last night. Sure you did, I claimed. You walked over to check on the dogs. They were whining. I promise I did not get up last night. See, I told you to stop saying that silly thing. You're inviting bad things, you know. His tone was playful, but he seemed honest about not getting up. Maybe you were half asleep, I said. Maybe that's why you don't remember. The day seemed to stretch on. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened the night before. I know I saw him, and he usually gets up to check on the dogs if they were whining. It had to be him. We fell asleep pretty early tonight. I woke up again because the room was freezing. It usually stays pretty warm down here in the summer, but I thought maybe it was because it had been raining so much. I saw my husband up again, over by the dogs and the AC unit. The dogs were whining. I had to get him this time, since I missed out last night, so I chanted a little louder. The shadow man walks at night. He turned and slowly walked towards the bed. As he got closer, he seemed to grow taller, his shadow feeling darker. I shifted a bit, and that's when I felt my husband laying next to me in the bed. Staring at this thing, it was growing closer and closer. Out of desperation, I flicked on the lamp next to our bed. The room was flooded with light. The thing had disappeared. My husband shifted and mumbled, scowling from the bright light. I am writing this now in the middle of the night, terrified to turn off the light. If I do, the shadow man could come back. I don't know what will happen if he does, and I'm too scared to find out.
So you know how kids see stuff when they're little? This was one of those stories. When I was younger, I was petrified of the man. I don't remember any of this because I was too young, but apparently on multiple occasions, I would stand completely still and verbally whisper, "Who is that man?" And when questioned what he wants, I would say, I don't know, it's the man." Anyway, most people would blow that off. I happen to have 3 younger sisters, 2 of which had similar experiences, petrified of the man, or for my other sister, the guy. My mom was super creeped out and started seeking religious guidance. So growing up, I was always told about this, and when I questioned it as a teenager, my mom brought me a photo of me as a baby. I'm in a rocker, the TV is off behind me, and there is a perfect glare of a close-up man. Distinctively looks like he is a 50 to 60-year-old man. Oddly enough, my parents took pictures from multiple angles that night. It's right when they remodeled the living room. There is nothing in the room to cast a shadow or make it appear like a man's face. Well, I'm suspicious but never really believed. But then one day, I'm at my parents' house at 24, but my 2-year-old is staring up my parents' steps and whispers, "Daddy, there's a man." I almost pooped my pants.
Last summer, I moved into a fixer-upper house in a small cul-de-sac. It was a town new to me and a bit of a sketchy area compared to where I lived prior, but it was cheap. And it was exactly what I needed with my inconsistent outside sales job that was heavily commission-based. Now, this house may have looked really bad from afar, but I'm a bit of a handyman, so I knew what I was getting into. I restored and modernized the house fairly quickly, and up next on my to-do list was cutting the horrendously long, overgrown grass in the backyard. On the morning I was off to pick up a lawnmower, I found a handwritten note on my car's windshield. "Do not cut the grass. Let it grow." I chuckled and surveyed the surrounding area. I figured it must have been a gag joke note for the guy new to the neighborhood. I hopped in my car and drove to the hardware store. When I returned home, I got to mowing. The grass was knee-high and a nauseating sight for me, a man who likes everything clean and orderly. It ended up taking almost 2 hours to complete the job, but boy did it look gorgeous out there. When I went to collect my mail, I found another note on a folded piece of paper. "I told you not to cut the grass. Let it grow." A cold shiver ran through me. How in the world did someone know that I had just cut my grass? I was determined it was one of the neighbors messing with me, so I started going door to door. It was a perfect time anyway to introduce myself. At the house on the driveway side of mine, I knocked and was greeted by an older retired gentleman named Grady. He wore blue overalls and a red baseball cap with a deteriorating logo. Grady came across as the kind of guy who rarely left his house. When I questioned him about the note, he let out an awful wheeze of a laugh, denying any involvement with it. It was hard to tell if he was sincere when my focus rested on how many teeth he was missing when he smiled, but I thanked him for his honesty and headed to the house on the other side of mine. Ivan, a tall, husky, bald man, pushed open the screen door. His wife, Melody, lurked a bit behind him. They both seemed nice enough, and they assured me that they had nothing to do with the note. They told me it was probably some teenager on his bike messing with me. Still, though, I felt a bit uneasy. My stomach churned for a few hours, but eventually I moved on and forgot about it. But then a few weeks later, another note surfaced. "Do not cut the grass again. Let it grow." Now I was convinced there was a hidden camera or something in my backyard. I looked and looked around the yard for anything out of the ordinary, but I had no luck. I was fuming at this point, full of anger. "You're not telling me what to do. I'm cutting it, and I'm always going to cut it," I shouted like a drunken idiot talking to the air. I took great pleasure in cutting the grass that day. Each blade was picture perfect. I was starving at this point, so I decided to go pick up some fast food. Of course, there was another note on my windshield. "Stop cutting the grass." I crumpled up the piece of paper and tossed it aside. When I got home, I popped open a cold one and brought a folding chair out on the backyard. As I sat out there in the scorching sun, all I could think about were those notes. I was livid, upset, and ready to drown my frustration in booze. After 6 beers, I turned up the boombox and started dancing like a fool. About a minute into it, I tripped and fell to my knees. colliding with a hard, rough surface below a section of the grass. I grabbed the shovel from the garage and started to dig. After removing some dirt, I came across a wooden crate. I was sweaty and nervous and almost too afraid to open it, but I had to get to the bottom of it and find out what was happening to me. I covered my mouth in disgust when I saw it, a pile of bones, human remains with hints of dried blood. I ran inside the house and was about to call the cops, but then I saw my neighbors. Outside the living room window, I saw Grady, Ivan, and Melody walking in my front yard towards my front porch. Grady was holding a crowbar and Melody was carrying an axe. I just about pissed myself. The only smart thing I thought of was to distract them just enough for me to get in my car and bail. I grabbed my car keys and went back in my backyard. As I heard the first few knocks coming from the front door, I picked up the boombox, which was still on. I carried it to the side of my house and hurled it against the fence, hoping they would make their way to the noise. I then ran to the other side of my house and slowly made my way to my car. The bait worked. They were exploring the noise, so I quietly got in my car and started the engine. As I backed up, Melody shot out of nowhere and jumped on the windshield, slamming the axe into the glass repeatedly. "We told you not to cut the grass," she hissed. I sped up faster and then slammed on the brakes, sending her flying to the concrete. I didn't look back. I drove to another town and contacted the authorities. They told me to accompany them to the house to investigate. I refused and instead booked a night at a motel. There was no way I was going back there with those crazy folks around. Later that evening, I received a call from the cop. He told me that the house on both sides of mine had been vacant for years, abandoned. Unfortunately, when the cops arrived, Grady, Ivan, and Melody were nowhere to be found. I felt sick to my stomach. I had no interest in finding out whose remains I stumbled upon. One thing was for sure, though. I was not going to continue to live in that house. I had a cop posted outside the afternoon I moved all my stuff out. It was too risky going alone. I moved to another town, and for the most part, I have felt safe. I just hope I never run into Grady, Ivan, and Melody ever again.
When I was a kid, my family and a friend's family went to this park in Okinawa, Japan. It was quite late, so it was only us at the park. My friend and I decided to play hide and seek. He ran off to hide, and I started counting. When I was done, I turned around and gave the park a quick look over to see if I could spot him. To my joy, I did, sitting at the top of the slide. I quietly made my way up to the slide, keeping my eye out for him if he tried to sneak down somehow. When I reached the top of the ladder, I yanked myself up and screamed, "Found you!" Yet nobody was there. I then heard my friend's laughter from a lower part of the park. I was incredibly confused because I knew for a fact I saw someone up there. That's when I got this feeling, almost like a pressure coming from the side. I climbed down rather than sliding, and I finally got my friend. I then asked him, "How did you get down the slide?" He stared at me and responded by saying he was never up there. Hearing that sent chills across my body. I never went back up to that slide. I was too afraid. I don't really remember the name of the park. I think it started with an M, but it's been some time, so I can't be sure.
When I was 8 years old, my family moved from my original childhood home into a 120-year-old house with a lot of history. It was a beautiful house, but there had been a big fire in it many years ago, and it was abandoned for 15 years. I really didn't like the house when we first moved. The energy felt off, and I felt like I was constantly being watched. There were certain rooms where the energy felt so off. I refused to go in there alone. We also ended up moving my bedroom after 1 or 2 years because I hated the energy in my room and couldn't explain it to anyone. My parents wrote those feelings off as just being a scared 8-year-old, but the feelings about specific rooms maintained until we moved out when I was 18. A lot of strange occurrences happened during the 10 years I lived in this house, so much so that in high school I started to wonder if I could be schizophrenic, even though these occurrences happened exclusively at home, and since moving I haven't experienced anything. I was constantly seeing things out of the corner of my eye or hearing footsteps when I was home alone, but I'm going to share 2 experiences that really stand out in my memory. For my 13th or 14th birthday, I had a few girlfriends sleep over in my living room. Some of them had never been to my house before, and I didn't tell them anything about it because I just wanted everyone to have a good time and not feel spooked. The next morning, one friend asked why my dad was walking in between our sleeping bags for a wall last night. I immediately knew that wasn't my dad. My parents went up to bed while we were still awake, and my dad confirmed he didn't get up in the night. My friend didn't particularly want to sleep over after that first night. Another experience that I vividly remembered happened when I was coming home from a party in high school. It was after midnight, but I was definitely sober because I drove that night. I was entering the back door that was in the backyard and opened into the kitchen. As I was putting my key in the door, I looked through the glass pane on the door. The view went straight through the kitchen and into the hallway near the front of the house. At one side of the hallway wall in view was a full-length mirror hanging up. In the brief few seconds I was looking through the glass on the door, I saw a very distinct, solid-looking figure run out of the mirror. It looked like it was in the position that sprinters are in when they crouch down to start a race, and it looked like it was wearing a royal blue morph suit. Weird, but I saw what I saw. The figure ran out of the mirror and dissipated into the staircase on the other side of the hallway. After seeing that, I remember booking it to my bedroom, closing the door and falling asleep with the lights and TV on.
I was young, 5 to 7, somewhere in there. I was sleeping in between my parents for whatever reason. I woke up, I remember the clock reading around 4 a.m. There was something standing by the window looking out into the front yard. It looked like a man in a brown wool robe about 6'4" or so. I started to stir and sat up in bed, and then the thing turned and looked at me. Dear God, that face, extremely pale white skin, lots of really pronounced wrinkles, and the face dropped like it was melting down into a really pointy chin, almost similar to the Scream mask, but with all the open features of a living being. Its mouth was hanging open and its eyes were wide, almost like it was worried or frightened. It kept its gaze on me while it moved away from the window in front of the bed, and then out the open bedroom door. The second it exited the room, the lights turned on their own, and both of my parents jumped up on either side of me, breathing heavily like they just woke up from a nightmare. To be clear, I was fully able to move during this. I don't think it was sleep paralysis, but I'm not sure what it could have been, other than some kind of demon or really ugly ghost. I've never seen it since, but I can still picture it clear as day.
Once when I was in university, I went to go see my therapist, whom I had been seeing twice a week for about 5 months. On this day, he was uncharacteristically quiet, and I asked him if he was all right. He said he was fine, and we continued through what would be one of our most breakthrough sessions. A lot of repressed memories came up through it that had helped me to heal. At the end of the session, I asked him why he was acting differently today than other days. He said when I walked in, I was accompanied by a warrior-like person. He said he had the overwhelming feeling to perform as best as he professionally could that day, and that he got the sense that this warrior had fought a lot of battles to protect me. This would seem coincidental, except for 10 years later, I was living on the other side of the world. I had a Puerto Rican neighbor I would see occasionally, and eventually got pretty close with him and his family. One day, as I was walking by, he kind of gets quiet and weird and then says in broken English, "Do you know there is a soldier who follows you around?" I knew instantly who he was talking about. In both instances, the warrior/soldier was described the same, just over 6 feet, blonde curly hair, wearing primitive warrior clothing, and strangely a white guy. Neither of these people could have known that my closest brother, who had passed away at 14, was over 6 feet tall with blonde curly hair, and always was my protector.
So the last story we're gonna read is actually one that I wrote because I had to do it for one of my classes. So I hope you guys like it. I was working on my homework when I heard a loud, startling sound. I got really scared because I was home alone. I decided to go check out what had happened. I grabbed the bat in my room and proceeded to go down the stairs. Once I got downstairs, my jaw dropped. The window was broken. I was really scared. I thought, Someone broke in. I was so scared, so I decided I was going to go back in my room and call the police. I was about to go up the stairs when I noticed someone was in the pantry. At first, I couldn't really see the person, but then I saw the hair and the clothes. It was a clown. I was going to scream, but I stopped myself. I ran upstairs instead. Then I realized something. No, I left my phone downstairs. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't go get it. It was too risky. 10 minutes later, I heard the person coming upstairs. I ran in my closet and hid behind the clothes. I hear him say, "Don't be scared, I just want to play." I could hear him dragging something on the floor. I wondered, does he have any weapons on him? 2 minutes passed and I didn't hear anything. Then he started banging on my door. I screamed a little. I heard the shelf crack. As I was grabbing onto the shelf above, I noticed the door on the roof. How could I forget, I said. The attic door is in my closet. I went into the attic. It was connected to the entire house. My chance to escape and call the police, I thought. I got out of the door and went to the kitchen to get my phone. I could still hear the man walking and banging on the door. I grabbed my phone and went back into the attic. I called the police and told them what had happened. 10 minutes later, I hear them come in, so I get out of the attic and run to them crying. They immediately run upstairs and grab the man. I was so relieved. My parents got home and I ran to them and gave them hugs. To this day, I still remember that man's scary face with the mask on as the police were taking him out of the house. I remember he stared at me until he got in the car. Ever since that day, I've never stayed home alone.
So that's all for this video. Hope you enjoyed.
So make sure to subscribe and like the video and come back next Friday for a new video.
Bye!